In 1983, Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, announced a new product called Windows. Gates envisioned Windows as the future of personal computing. It would be a graphical user interface, or GUI. This meant users could interact with their computers using images and icons instead of just text commands. This was a big deal. At the time, most personal computers used text-based operating systems like MS-DOS, also made by Microsoft. These systems were difficult for many people to use. Windows promised to make computers simpler and more accessible to everyone. The first version of Windows, Windows 1.0, was released 2 years later in 1985. Windows 1.0 was a far cry from the Windows we know today. It wasn't a complete operating system. Instead, it was more like a graphical shell that ran on top of MS-DOS. Windows 1.0 introduced some familiar features, like windows you could move around on the screen. It also had simple programs like a calculator, a calendar, and a word processor called Windows Write. Over the next few years, Microsoft released several updated versions of Windows, including Windows 2.0 and Windows 3.0. These versions improved upon the original Windows. They offered better graphics, more features, and support for more powerful computers. However, Windows still relied on MS-DOS underneath. It hadn't yet become a true operating system in its own right. In 1995, Microsoft released Windows 95. This was a major milestone for both Microsoft and the entire personal computer industry. Windows 95 was a complete operating system that didn't need MS-DOS to run. It introduced many features that are still familiar today. For example, the Start menu, the taskbar, and the Minimize, Maximize, and Close buttons on Windows all appeared for the first time in Windows 95. Windows 95 was a huge success for Microsoft, selling millions of copies in its first few weeks of release. It helped to popularize the use of personal computers around the world. Windows 95 also marked the beginning of Microsoft's dominance in the operating system market, a position they have maintained ever since. Building upon the success of Windows 95, Microsoft released Windows 98 in 1998. Windows 98 included several improvements and new features, but the most significant was the deeper integration of Internet Explorer, Microsoft's web browser. The Internet was becoming increasingly popular. With Windows 98, Microsoft made it easier than ever for users to connect to the Internet and explore the World Wide Web. Windows 98 also introduced the Windows Desktop update. This brought Active Desktop to the operating system, allowing users to have web content displayed directly on their desktop. This release further solidified Windows as the leading operating system for home and business use. It demonstrated Microsoft's commitment to keeping pace with the rapidly evolving world of technology. Section 5: Controversy and Innovation, the Browser Wars. The integration of Internet Explorer into Windows 98 proved to be a pivotal moment in computing history. It also sparked controversy and legal challenges. Microsoft's decision to bundle its web browser with its operating system was accused of being anti-competitive. Competitors argued that it gave Microsoft an unfair advantage in the browser market. This led to the famous United States versus Microsoft antitrust case. The US Department of Justice sued Microsoft. They alleged that the company had abused its monopoly power in the PC market to stifle competition. The case resulted in a settlement. Microsoft was required to make changes to its business practices. However, the impact of bundling Internet Explorer with Windows had a lasting impact. It solidified the browser's dominance and shaped the Internet landscape for years to come. Section 6: Windows Me, saying goodbye to DOS. In 2000, Microsoft released Windows Me, short for Millennium Edition. This version was intended as a stopgap release between the older Windows 9X series and the newer Windows NT-based line. Windows Me introduced some new features for home users. This included System Restore, a feature that allowed users to revert their computer to a previous state if something went wrong. While Windows Me offered some improvements, it was also criticized for its instability and lack of compatibility with some older hardware and software. It marked the end of an era. It was the last version of Windows to be based on the aging MS-DOS architecture. From this point forward, all future versions of Windows would be built upon the more robust and secure Windows NT foundation. Section 7, Windows NT and 2000 Power and Stability. While Windows 95 and its successors were designed for home users, Microsoft had been developing a separate line of operating systems for businesses and servers, Windows NT. Windows NT stood for New Technology. It was designed from the ground up to be more stable, secure and powerful than the Windows 9X series. Windows NT was initially released in 1993 and it evolved over several versions. In 2000, Microsoft released Windows 2000, a significant update to the NT line. Windows 2000 brought many of the stability and security features of NT to the consumer market. It was a major step forward in the evolution of Windows. It paved the way for future versions that would further blur the lines between consumer and professional operating systems. In 2001, Microsoft released Windows XP, one of the most popular and enduring versions of Windows ever released. Windows XP combined the consumer friendliness of the Windows 9X series with the stability and security of the Windows NT line. It also introduced a new visual style that was more colorful and user-friendly than previous versions. Windows XP was a massive success for Microsoft. It became the default operating system for millions of computers worldwide. Its popularity lasted for many years. Even today, more than 2 decades after its release, Windows XP remains a fond memory for many computer users. Following the success of Windows XP, Microsoft faced the challenge of creating a worthy successor. In 2007, they released Windows Vista. Vista aimed to improve security. It included a new feature called User Account Control, or UAC, to prevent unauthorized changes to the system. It also introduced a redesigned user interface with a new search function and improved multimedia capabilities. Despite its ambitions, Windows Vista received a mixed reception. While its security improvements were welcomed, Vista was criticized for its high system requirements. Many users found that their existing hardware struggled to run the new operating system smoothly. Additionally, the numerous UAC prompts were seen as intrusive by some. Learning from the challenges faced by Windows Vista, Microsoft released Windows 7 in 2009. Windows 7 focused on refinement and evolution rather than revolution. It addressed many of the performance issues that plagued Vista. It also refined the user interface, making it more intuitive and user-friendly. Windows 7 was praised for its stability, performance, and compatibility with a wide range of hardware and software. It quickly became one of the most popular versions of Windows. It helped to restore Microsoft's reputation after the relative disappointment of Vista. In 2012, Microsoft released Windows 8, a bold departure for the operating system. Windows 8 was designed with touchscreens in mind. It featured a new start screen with live tiles that displayed information from apps. It also introduced a new class of apps designed specifically for touch interaction. However, the changes in Windows 8 proved to be divisive. Many users disliked the removal of the traditional start menu. They found the new touch-centric interface confusing and difficult to use on traditional desktop computers. In response to this feedback, Microsoft released Windows 8.1 in 2013. It restored the Start button and made other improvements to the user interface. In 2015, Microsoft released Windows 10. This version aimed to bridge the gap between the touch-centric approach of Windows 8 and the familiar desktop experience of previous versions. Windows 10 reintroduced the Start menu, combining elements of the classic menu with live tiles from Windows 8. It also introduced a new web browser, Microsoft Edge, designed to replace Internet Explorer. Windows 10 also marked a shift in Microsoft's approach to operating system updates. Instead of releasing major new versions every few years, Windows 10 would receive ongoing updates and new features through a service model. This approach ensured that users would always have access to the latest improvements and security updates. In 2021, Microsoft released Windows 11, the latest major version of its operating system. Windows 11 features a redesigned user interface with a centered taskbar and rounded corners for Windows. It also includes new productivity features such as snap layouts for easier multitasking and improved support for multiple monitors. Windows 11 also introduces tighter integration with Microsoft's cloud services, such as OneDrive and Microsoft Teams. It represents Microsoft's vision for the future of computing, where the operating system seamlessly connects users to their apps, files, and devices across multiple platforms.